right?
Mm-hmm.
Whenever a oppressor in power has to be faced with the fact that what they're doing is inhumane, they get to fall back on the idea that the resistance to those actions is violent, when the resistance is only there because of the horrible thing they are doing. I think we saw this in Black Lives Matter, right? People were protesting against the systematic oppression of Black people, and they were using the death of George Floyd as like a representation of like, this is not a one-off event, this is a very public and visual. But rather than having to confront the idea that what happened to George Floyd was not an individual event, that it was a systematic failure, what they did is say, well, your resistance to this system, that is violence. Whether or not things were violent, they would escalate it to a point where it become violence, and they could fall back on the idea that they were just acting in self-defense, even though it is a action of their design, right? They created this situation, right? Oppression creates the conditions that make violence necessary, and then when people act out against the oppression, well, they can turn around and say, the oppressor can turn around and say, see, we told you that the oppression was necessary, look how violent they are. That's what I'm saying. And that's kind of the difficulty. And what I was saying about allyship is, in this stupid paper, what I was saying is, and this is for decolonization, but it applies to other oppression stuff, you can get allies in your movement, but a lot of the time it's going to be very superficial, because allies from the in group supporting the out group, right? They have to be willing to give up like the safety and superiority that being in the in group gives them. Their values have to outweigh the safety and I think we see this in capitalism, right? Rich people, to support the poor, they can look and say hunger is bad, like people shouldn't be in poverty. But to give up the power they get from being very wealthy that would help support the poor, to pay more taxes, to regulate industry more, to
have a wealth cap,
destroy the wealth gap, to give that up would relinquish them of their power. So that safety net that being in the in group, the powerful group, gives them outweighs their feelings for the systemic issues. Okay, I know I'm like blabbering, but listen to me. They can superficially, right? We see all these like rich people say poverty is bad, but the long-term solutions to that are things that make them less powerful, so they don't want to do them. And that's that's kind of what I'm saying here.
Well, isn't that sort of like money is the root of all evil, right? Money and power is still overpowering their conscience or their ethics.
It is. I mean, I wouldn't say it's just money. I think it's power in general, because this is like decolonization, allyship from, like, think about the civil rights movement, and the civil rights movement is like decolonization, but it's also like not, because, you know, it's very complicated. Civil rights movement, right?
Okay.
Martin Luther King was talking about, he was saying, we had these white allies from the North, and they would support the Black liberation movement when they saw these like lynchings and these like brutal beatings and these horrible things happening to Black people in the South, and in the North too. And he was like, they supported the resistance against that. But when it came to the foundational structure and systemic change, they pulled back, and they didn't show up for those marches. Because what he was observing, what he was saying is, like, I don't remember the exact quote, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
He was basically saying, like, what they opposed was not racism, necessarily. It was just the brutality of it, and how in their face it was.
Doesn't that seem a little bit like the white person's right to comfort, right? Like, it wasn't centered actually in Black people's oppression and liberation, because it wasn't about systemic change. It was about the fact that white people were upset at having to see violence.
Yeah.
Do you think that rings
Yes.
true?
Yes, and I also think it is, again, this, like, power thing of, like, I'm sure they felt sympathy towards the Black liberation movement, but that sympathy did not overweigh the fact that they were benefiting from racism.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because, like, I don't want to make it seem like white allies in the civil rights movement were making it all about themselves, but just that their empathy had limits, and the limit was when they got to a place where they had to actually give up power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm kind of...
That's a great... Yeah, I agree with
That's
you.
what I'm seeing here, and that was, like, my point of the paper. Okay, thank you.
That's a good pop-off.